Well, hello, folks out there in YouTube land. Got a big show lined up for you. Let's get right on into this thing. All right, folks, we may have a $300 million settlement coming within the next 40 days as far as some sort of a general understanding of it. And I'm sure you realize the SEC and the Big Ten are going to call a lot of these shots. Now, this is kind of a big show. I better have a little bit of help with this one. Peyton, Carl, help me out.
Omaha! Up!
Thanks, guys. I appreciate that. Now, what this is really about, you've got 4 lawsuits out there. And the biggest one being the House versus the NCAA, which is an antitrust lawsuit. And they're suing for a lot of money, in the billions. And the issue is when you sue over antitrust, the damages can be tripled. So this thing could get ugly real quick. So the NCAA, SEC, Big Ten, the other conferences, they're trying to get in front of this and put some sort of settlement together because they do realize if this thing finishes in court, they're probably going to lose. Because the Supreme Court's already come out and said you can't do anything that goes against the Sherman Act. And the Sherman Act speaks to the antitrust issues involved. And the Supreme Court's already slammed them down 9-0, which is extremely rare for that court. And several of the judges on that court have said, if you bring another case up here, you're going to get smacked down even worse. So the conference leaders, the Greg Sankeys, the Petites, the NCAA, Charlie Baker and all of them, they realize they're on the losing end of this. So they need to come up with some sort of deal that would make sense for the athletes, NCAA, and all these attorneys and antitrust lawsuits. And like I said, there's 4 big ones right now. They're trying to combine them all together, 3 of which they think they've got combined, but there's also one called the Fontenot lawsuit, and they're trying to get that pulled in so they can settle all of these over a 10-year period with a big payment. And what they're coming up with is that each school would come up with $300 million over the next 10 years. And this has been reported by Ross Dellinger, who did a great job on this, and he's got a great article on it. The revenue sharing would be $17 to $22 million per team that participates in this. $2 million in back damages every year for 10 years. That's each school, realize. And then $10 million in additional scholarships, which I hadn't even heard about that. That would obviously be that you'd have more scholarships on each team. And I talked to you the other day about how the golf team back in the 80s when I was on the team at UT, we only had 5 total scholarships, but we had like 14 players, a few of which were walk-ons. But you pretty much split that between 10 or 11 guys. Well, they're talking about adding more scholarships on, I guess, the football team, basketball, every team, which would cost about $10 million a year. And the reason they came up with this number, it's 20% of the average athletic department's revenue that comes in each year. Now, granted, there are some teams that get a whole lot more revenue than other teams, and that's why the SEC and Big Ten are the most dangerous involved in this for all the other conferences involved, because whatever they agree to is what the deal's going to be. Now, you don't have to spend all of the $17 to $22 million, but if you don't, you're going to fall further behind. This also doesn't speak to the NIL deal, in my opinion, because you still can sell your name, image, and likeness if you're an athlete. Also, there are a bunch of other questions in this. The biggest one is this: how do you determine how much money each player would get? And why this gets so tricky, you've got Title IX right smack dab in the middle, and the second you forget about Title IX, you're making a big mistake.
Big mistake. Big. Huge. I have to go shopping now.
Yeah, Title IX is not going away. And it's going to be right in the middle of this. And here's what's going to happen. People are going to say, well, the football team generates 80% of the money. Therefore, 80% of the money should go to football players. And Title IX is going to have a conniption. Okay, they're going to freak out. They're going to say, oh no, if there's 20 million bucks, 10 million's going to the men, 10 million's going to the women. And I can go ahead and tell you, there's plenty of people in Congress that would not go along with anything other than 10 and 10. They don't give a crap how much money the football team generates. That is meaningless. So you might as well just go ahead and know that. So there is a lot to be worked out through this. And then you're going to have a bunch of teams, like I say, that just simply can't do that much money. And the reason that is, and I've shown you this breakdown, and I like these charts just easier. If you're in the Big Ten or the SEC, this is how much you get per team each year. Okay. And this number might be a little bit high for Big Ten because there's a couple little weird things in their contract, but it's pretty much Big Ten and SEC are about the same. Then the Big 12 and the ACC are about 20 million behind, maybe as much as 25 million behind, just depending on how you sum it up. So that's already a $20 to $25 million discrepancy. But They just came out with the college football playoff scenario where they're going to break down the money like this. And as you can see, the SEC and Big Ten will pick up another $10 million more bucks per year than the ACC and Big 12. And needless to say, this has caused a lot of unhappiness with the ACC and the Big 12.
Oh, no, no. No.
Now, separate of this settlement, and this would also be part of it, would be the NCAA agreeing to pay $2.9 billion over 10 years as part of this settlement, which again is separate. And how they would do that is each team would get $2 million less each year from the NCAA basketball tournament. And that basketball tournament pays out about $700 million per year across the board to different schools. So that's another reason why you're probably hearing a lot more talk about adding teams to the NCAA basketball tournament, because more teams, more money. And you know NCAA, if they're going to be paying out $2.9 billion over 10 years, is going to want more money.
Comes in pretty handy down here, bub. Oh,
So if they go from 64 or 66, I believe, well, that's actually 68. If they go to 80, that's 12 more teams, that's more basketball games, that's more money for the NCAA tournament from the TV contracts, et cetera, that they could rework. And you're also hearing the college football playoff, they're going to try to push that to 14 and then almost certainly 16 to get more money to pay off a lot of these settlements. Now, I think what they're going to need to do after all of this is somehow get an antitrust exemption from the Congress, which good luck with that. I just can't even imagine it. But even if you get all these settlements, who's to say there's not going to be another lawsuit pop up at some point? So you're going to need some sort of antitrust in order to settle this thing. And then I guess they could go to Congress and say, look, we've worked this out. You can see that we are paying the athletes. We've worked this out in some fair manner. And now, because of that, we can't have a lawsuit every 5 minutes over every little thing. Let us make some rules. And of course, since they're going to be paying players, they'll pretty much be employees. You'll probably have a union. You'll probably have collective. And I know this is getting boring, but this is going to happen. You're going to have some sort of collective bargaining, a union head, all these different things. This is going to be one of the most complicated things you've ever seen. And again, there is a 40-day deadline on this as far as some sort of, I guess, overall general agreement where they'd have to work out the details later. And they're going to try to work it out over the next 12 months because they're saying it can't be done before 2025, but they don't want it done any later in 2026. And again, this is all preliminary stuff, but it's moving pretty quickly. So my thinking on this, the Big Ten, the SEC, they're going to be the leaders. Whatever they decide is what everybody else is going to have to go along with to some level. A lot of schools are not going to be able to fully participate in this, and they may only be able to pay 20, well, if they do it based on percentage and say 20% of the total athletic budget or 22 or whatever it's going to be, the other teams that don't make as much money or don't bring in as much, they won't have to pay out as much. Well, that all sounds good and well, but that hurts you competitively. Let's say you're a school in the ACC and you take in half as much money as an SEC school and you're going to pay out $10 million to the players. And a team in the SEC is going to pay out $22 million. Well, you're already at a big disadvantage right there. Then the NIL situation. Like I said, I don't know how you stop that. I would think you could still sell your name, image, and likeness to some level. Of course, if you're an employee and you've collectively bargained, I don't think you would. You may not be able to. So the NIL thing is still hanging out in the air as to how they would deal with that. And I would think the players would not want to give that up. And certainly the union head wouldn't want to give that up either, because he's going to be sitting there going, or she, and say, they can still sell their name, image, and likeness. You see it in the NFL all the time. How many of those double discount things have you seen with Rodgers and Mahomes? The double check discount thing, whatever the crap that's called. So I would think they'll still be able to do name, image, and likeness if they're big enough athletes. So look for a lot of movement over the next 40 days on this, and we'll probably start hearing a lot more details as the next month goes by. But there'll probably be something come out in the next 40 days that pretty much lays out some sort of general outline of exactly how this is going to go, and it's going to get moved around. Because realize that there's 4 teams of attorneys over here with, House, Hubbard, Carter, and Fontenot, or Fontenot, whatever. And they're over there going, oh, that's not enough money. And NCAA and the teams and the SEC and Big Ten are over there going, oh, yes, it is. And it'll get ugly before it gets better. Dalton, tell them.
It'll get worse before it gets better.
Yeah, going to get worse before it gets better.
Roadhouse.
But it'll probably be done behind closed doors. We won't see a lot of the sausage getting made. But anyway, look for players to start getting paid from the schools in probably 2026. I don't know if it'll happen in 25. It could, but I think it'll take them longer to get this worked out. As far as the antitrust exemption or whatever, which they're probably going to need something along those lines, that's a total crapshoot. It really is. And the Title IX thing, that's going to play a huge role in this. How it all plays out, we'll see. But if you think you're going to get an antitrust exemption without Title IX getting exactly what they want,
You serious?
you're living in fantasy land. So they may have to do this deal even without that antitrust provision. Anyway, I know this gets complicated, but we'll try to keep up with it as best we can and try to summarize it as much as possible. And by the way, how this is all going to affect coaches, there is talk that a lot of coaches, administrators, and folks like that are going to have to take pay cuts. Now, personally, I cannot imagine any world where the head coaches at the big schools are going to make less money. I mean, we just got a $13 million deal per year cut for Kirby Smart.
Woo!
Woo!
Woo! Ow!
Love that money.
Josh Heupel's making $9 million a year. Mike Norvell, I think he's up to around 11 because Alabama was possibly trying to hire him after Nick Saban retired. And Ryan Day, if he wins a national title in the next year or two, he'll probably be around 12, 13 million a year. So I don't see any way the big dogs are going to make less money. But I could see the administration of a lot of these athletic departments having to do pay cuts because a lot of this money now has to go to the players. You take 20% out of a budget, that's huge. That is monstrous. And it's going to affect how much you can pay the administration. And a lot of the other coaches that are at the smaller sports, they're probably going to have to cut their pay as well. You won't see huge salaries for the smaller sports. And a lot of folks haven't been talking about that yet, but they will over time. It's just, there's only so much money. And if it's all in a pot and you take 20% and go boom, there's 20% less for everything else. That's just the way that it is. So don't expect this to be, oh, the players get a bunch of money and everything else stays the same. It will not. It can't. The financials of it make it impossible. Anyway, if you like this content, be sure to hit that like button. Let's continue to cover all these big college sports stories. If you've not subscribed, hit this little button right here. It doesn't cost you a dime. It would help me out. I'd certainly appreciate it.
Come on. Come on. Oh, okay. Oh, okay.
And right over here's the most recent video YouTube thinks you'll enjoy based on your viewing history. We'll see you next time on Sports Talk Jay.